Welcome to Downtown Rotary. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome Jesse Schmidt to do our invocation.
Good morning. Today I'd like to pay tribute to those who paid the ultimate sacrifice for us this last week. Marine Corps Staff Sergeant Darren Hoover, Marine Corps Sergeant Johnny Rosario Picardo, Marine Corps Sergeant Nicole Gee, Marine Corps Corporal Hunter Lopez, Marine Corps Corporal Dugan Page, Marine Corps Corporal Humberto Sanchez, Marine Corps Lance Corporal David Espinoza, Marine Corps Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz, Marine Corps Lance Corporal Riley McCullum, Marine Corps Lance Corporal Dylan Merola, Marine Corps Corporal Kareem Nikoy, Navy Hospitalman Maxton Soviak, Army Staff Sergeant Ryan Naus. We pray for them and all those who serve with them. Amen.
Jesse, thank you so very much. We have a full room. It is wonderful to see so many Rotarians with us today. I also want to give a general welcome and thank you for all of our guests who are in attendance today, and a warm thank you to our greeters who made it possible to get everybody in the room ready to go here at noon while we have our senator with us today. Something that I always find really special is when we can invite new Rotarians into the fold, and we have two inductions today. The first, Joel Sylvester, please introduce our new Rotarian.
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. I'm going to leave most of the introductions to John Sowers, but I do have 3 points that I wanted to kind of talk about as long as I've known Joanne. So first off, we met 7 years ago at Caesars in Las Vegas. And this is the first time maybe ever a conversation started with we met in Vegas, and I'm introducing her to Downtown Rotary. So really excited about that. Joanne has been in the fintech industry for many years, and I've always appreciated her knowledge on the subject and really her knowledge of banks and issuers, big and small. And then lastly, Joanne is kind of a child of the world. She's not from Sioux Falls, born in Florida, dreamed of making her way to South Dakota, and has finally made it. And for me personally, when I'm looking at different markets or looking at things, how things are working outside of South Dakota, I've personally lived in both North Dakota and South Dakota, so I'm pretty well traveled myself. But I will reach out to Joanne and ask her about different markets and things like that. So those are the things that I'm excited to have her as part of our group. So welcome, and I'll let her give the introduction.
Hi there. Good afternoon. Yeah, so to Joel's point, we actually, in a period of about 5 years, did 3 moves across the country and back. And fortunately, I have a husband that keeps following me all over, and we've landed here. So we're here from Atlanta. We've been here just about 4.5 years and love it. It's funny, the CEO that hired me in Atlanta was commuting from here, and he's like, before you move, I want to put you in an apartment. I want to make sure you can handle the winter. Our white stuff is different than your white stuff in Florida. Anyway, I was laughing, so all of you will appreciate this. My husband is the Southern boy, born and raised in the South. His first winter ever was just about 4.5 years ago. Today, when I left, he's mowing the yard. He has the snowblower running to make sure that it's ready so when snow is here. Only Southerners are out there doing that. So I really appreciate Joel exposing me to the Rotary and being a part of this. Again, being relatively new to Sioux Falls, really excited about the sense of community and the people that are here. Our office right now is in Del Rapids. We've got a second one here in Sioux Falls, but it's just coming from such large cities, the opportunity, you've always networked, you've always had people that you've worked with in your professional community, but on the personal side, to be able to walk downtown and see somebody, like I was in the parking lot and I saw somebody drive by who I take Pilates with and thought, that would never happen anywhere else. And to me, that's the cool part about being here and a part of being of the Rotary. I mean, there's already, hopefully for Joel's sake, I'll meet others of you, and he won't be required to chaperone me each time I come in and make sure that I'm not sitting here by myself. So really excited about that. I think what being a Rotarian means most to me is just, especially where we are now in just the state of the world, but much less in the state of the United States, being able to lead as an individual, much less as a group, as to how to be kind to people and how to reach out and how to be respectful of each other, feels more and more that it needs to start from home, and it needs to start in our community and let our community lead and take care of others in the community, rather than having somebody somewhere else tell us what to do and how to do. I think we need to lead by example, and that's what I see here when I come into these meetings. And I'm really excited to be a part of that, and to the extent that I can offer value within the community, pretty excited to be a part of that. That's a unique feature, and I think that unique particularly to Sioux Falls. Very excited to be a part of that. So please feel free to drag me in, introduce me, get me in the middle of, as my family says, God, Mom, you talk to strangers all the time. I obviously have never met anybody that I won't talk to or be a part of. So please feel free to introduce me and get me involved. And thanks for having me.
I now would like to welcome Kathy Thorson to introduce our next induction. Kathy?
Thank you, Cindy. I am so excited to be here. Rotary is just the best. I think you will all agree with me. I have the honor today of introducing for you and to membership Keith Portner. My story is completely different than Joel and Joanne's. I hired Keith in 1993, right out of college, to run a grocery store bank for me at Marquette Bank at Hy-Vee. Keith moved on, took other opportunities as his career grew. And 10 years ago, I had the opportunity to hire him back at the time, what was Metabank, now Central. And so we've been, once again, part of the same team for 10 years. Keith is a senior vice president with Central Bank. I would call him a friend. He's part of my team. And when I think about Keith, I want you to know I think of three words. He's driven, he's committed, and he's one of the best involved dads I've ever met. So please join me in welcoming Keith to Rotary.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you. Kathy's been just a huge catalyst to my career and so instrumental for not only everything for me personally, but the two banks that her and I have been involved with. Her leadership has made both of those institutions very successful. So thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Rotarians, for allowing me to be a part of the rich history of this organization. I am very involved with lots of different, and I recognize a lot of faces in here from United Way and Habitat and the Restore, and lots of bankers that I have lots of respect for, Tony, and maybe that's the only one in here, Tony. Just joking. But the servant heart of the Rotarian, I'm honored to become part of this great group with so many distinguished members in it. Also, thank you. A couple of you reached out to me already. I've done coffee and lunch with a couple of you, so thank you for making me feel so welcome. A little bit about me. I was born and raised in New Ulm, Minnesota. My parents still reside there. So yes, I am a Minnesota Vikings, Minnesota Twins, Minnesota Gophers fan. I attended Southwest Minnesota State in Marshall, graduated in 1993. Kathy hired me directly from there, and I've made Sioux Falls my home for the last 28 years. Been married to my lovely wife of 26 years. We have 4 children. Oldest one goes to Northern in Aberdeen. Just have one, became a jackrabbit this year. I have a daughter that is attending Jefferson High School. So if you haven't seen the new high school, it's phenomenal. And then we have a first grader, Madison. So that was a little awkward last week. At age 50, taking your daughter to first grade class when you look like I do. She says, "Dad, can't you wear a baseball hat?" But anyway, I've been in banking for 28 years. Like Kathy said, I started at Marquette Banks 28 years ago. Currently a senior vice president with Central Bank. Our goal is, to help individuals, small businesses with everything from mortgage. We have our own insurance division, cash management, services. A little bit about Central Bank. They did acquire us last year, was March of 2020. They acquired MetaBank's 17 branch locations, which Kathy and I are a part of. I work at the Western location. Now Central Bank we have 3 locations in Sioux Falls, Brookings, Dakota Dunes, Sioux City, Des Moines, Storm Lake, Cherokee, Sioux City, Ankeny. Those are our main locations that we're at. Central Bank's been around since 1877. The Browns, Tim and John, who are acting CEO and president currently, bought the bank in 1990. I feel very fortunate. We could have been bought out by lots of other banks, and I think Kathy would agree. It's really nice, family-owned bank. We see them, we talk to them on a weekly basis, so that's really nice. Again, thank you, fellow Rotarians. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to being an active member.
She'll turn it over to us in just a second. I don't think they have us live yet.
Have to take a moment for the picture pause. And while we did that, you can see that our program has come up on stage, and so very, very excited to have Senator Rounds with us today, and our own president, Tony Knorr, will be moderating. Tony, let's turn it right over to you so we can enjoy our time. Thank you both.
Thank you, Cindy, and welcome Rotarians and guests, and welcome Senator Rounds. It's an honor to sit down with former 2-term governor and now 2nd-term U.S. Senator. And before we do jump into, we have a lot of topics to get to. There's no shortage of things going on in our world. But I do want to allow you to recognize and welcome those members of your team that are with you today. So thank you for bringing your team, and welcome.
No, appreciate it, Tony. Thank you very much. I think in Sioux Falls, I've got a crew here. Some of the folks move back and forth between D.C. and here, but Tyler Thorson, who is my East River director, is here, and he's full-time here in the Sioux Falls region. Mark Johnston is here, and Mark moves back and forth with me a lot, but spends about half his time in D.C. and half of his time back here in Sioux Falls. Desmond is my communications officer. Desmond travels back and forth as well. We really do try to, with that, stay in touch as much as we can and not lose that South Dakota common sense approach. Sarah Mayer is here with us as well. Sarah's here in the Sioux Falls office, and Lucas Heitkamp is here with us as well here in the Sioux Falls office. So appreciate your participation, and most certainly, as you see them, they're here to be my contact here in the Sioux Falls region, and their job is not to sit in the office. Their job is to be out, to be available, to get around, to see you, and to make it easier for you to make contact with us whenever you need to, but to feel comfortable in visiting directly with them. Thanks for the opportunity.
Excellent. And thank you to the team for making this possible today, because we do want to get a lot of issues that we're all curious about. We're gonna jump right in and talk Afghanistan. So you are the only Senate Republican that serves on both the Armed Services as well as the Foreign Relations Committees, which I believe puts you in a unique position to be able to talk about Afghanistan and what's there. And before we get to the how we withdrew, let's talk philosophically on the what. The current administration is not the only administration that has attempted or expressed desire in bringing our troops home, but that decision was made this year. And do you want to just talk about your support or lack of support of a complete withdrawal of our military from Afghanistan?
Look, the situation in Afghanistan does not present an easy answer. There simply is no easy answer in terms of how we deal with Afghanistan and what's happened there. Remember to begin with that in 2001, the attack on the Twin Towers originated in Afghanistan and thus precipitated our military involvement there. There, because of the void in law in Afghanistan, meant that it was a hotbed for terrorist activity, Al-Qaeda in particular. They've continued, but at a much reduced rate over that 20-year period of time. We came in, we've lost several thousand, 2,000 soldiers over there, but since 2016, we've lost 65, including the 13 service members that we just lost. My preference, after having served on the Armed Services Committee for the last 7 years, and then just new in the Foreign Affairs Committee for this year, I don't think we should have had a total withdrawal. I think seriously what we probably needed to have done was to recognize that the value of having our men and women there in a limited number, but they're in a support capacity, would probably have meant that it would have been much more difficult for terrorists to maintain a presence there. It was working that way. Now, you've had 4 different presidents, all of which have had a desire to get out of Afghanistan to one point or another. Most of them have reduced the number of troops, but they have not said we're going to get out by a date certain. President Trump said that he wanted to get out, but he extended it into the next term. President Biden came in and said, I am going to get out and I'm going to announce to the world that we're going to be out at a date certain. That meant then that the Taliban, who are terrorists themselves, that they no longer had any reason to negotiate with the Afghan national government and no further reason to negotiate with us. I think by setting a date certain instead of a conditions-based withdrawal of additional troops, and perhaps another alternative to a reduced number, I think would have served us better long term. I think the fact that our allies were caught by surprise by the adamancy of the president and his insistence on a date certain was a self-imposed deadline that did not work to our advantage. The State Department was caught unaware. The State Department has been working very, very hard to try to get people out of Afghanistan as quickly as possible. The military was, to the best as we can see, not providing the president with the advice of a date certain, but rather of a conditions-based withdrawal date. This president decided that it was going to be a date certain. I think that was a mistake, and I think it's a mistake which is going to cost our country dearly in the long run. Look, I can't say it any better than what Bob Gates said it in May 12th of 2019. Bob Gates was the Secretary of Defense for President Obama, served during that same time that President Biden was at that time the vice president. But what he had shared was that he could not recall a time in the previous 4 decades in which Mr. Biden at that time had been correct in a foreign policy or a national policy decision. Now, that's from the former Secretary of Defense for President Obama. So we recognize and we walk this fine line of trying to be supportive of the president as commander-in-chief and providing as much protection as we can to the men and women that wear the uniform. But nonetheless, we do have an obligation to speak up, and many of us have, with regard to our committees and within our classified sections, to challenge a date-certain withdrawal and to strongly push for a conditions-based withdrawal, none of which have been heeded by the administration. So I'm disappointed. I think it's a mistake. But nonetheless, the president calls those shots. He is the commander-in-chief. So we move forward from there. Today, we have had approximately 117,000 individuals that have been airlifted out by a military and State Department that have worked 24/7 to try to be as successful as possible. We've removed about 5,400 American citizens. We still have over 300 left that we can't get out at this point, but we have to try. Our office has been directly involved in trying to provide assistance to those Afghans who would qualify for the Special Immigrant Visa, the SIVs, because they worked as interpreters or support for our National Guard or people that served out of South Dakota who have asked us specifically to try to help expedite and to get those folks out. We're still waiting right now, as a matter of fact, on word as to whether or not a number of those individuals and their families were able to escape before the airport is shut down entirely. We're hoping that if that does happen, that those individuals will be able to get out using other means, preferably through one of the other countries by ground transport. We're just hoping for the best on it. This was self-imposed, and we think it was in error.
Well, tomorrow's the date. So my understanding is, at this point, it's an attempt to get our troops out on time, and a lot of the civilian flights have been put off. So leaving a number of folks behind, and that's one of the questions I have, is those left behind, and then also, Senator, what does the future Taliban-led Afghanistan mean for our country? Not only for the people there, but for our country, our national security moving forward.
As I said earlier, we got into Afghanistan because there was a void in law there. That will continue to exist. Al-Qaeda, in this particular case, it's an offshoot of the main Al-Qaeda operation, but it's called Al-Qaeda-K, which is Afghan-based, is there. They are terrorists. They clearly are the ones that were behind the suicide bombing that occurred at the airport. They do exist. We've been able to maintain and to limit their activities, in part because we've had members of the Afghan National Forces that have done most of the fighting in conjunction with our men and women that are there in a reserve role or in leadership roles. We've provided them with intelligence. We've provided them with surveillance. We provided them with the technical background and the air support. Most of that now will be gone. And in doing so, the Afghan nationals who have trained and learned to fight as long as they had U.S. support in those areas were shocked when we left Bagram Air Base without even notifying their commander. And they saw that as us leaving like right now. When that occurred, a number of their technically qualified people to fly aircraft and so forth simply took the aircraft and headed out, headed across into other countries with that equipment. During the last couple of years in which the Afghan National Forces have been there, they've lost 65,000 of their members in combat, casualties. They've been carrying on the vast majority of the fight. The U.S. people have been in support of them, but have not been, for the most part, on the front lines in that fight. Very similar to the way that we have in the past looked at South Korea, where we still have a limited force there, Germany, where we still have a limited force there, other places such as in Syria, where we have a limited force right now. The idea is we do provide coordination, and we've been successful. What we see right now with the Taliban and what we've asked about in our classified discussions is that, number one, there is no evidence that this is any different type of a Taliban than what was there in 2000. We see no evidence that they're going to treat women any different than what they have in the past. We see no evidence that any of the individuals who are musicians or otherwise are going to be treated any different than what they have in the past. In fact, just in the eastern part of the country, they just executed a folk song singer because they don't believe that music should be a part of their culture. So they executed him, shot him in the head. That just happened this last week. So look, this is the kind of thing that we're up against out there. They have an entirely different way of looking at things. And we don't see the possibilities right now that it's going to improve. I know that there are some people that believe that they want international recognition, but I think that goes to maybe the top leadership, but I'm not sure about the folks that are on the ground and are going to be enforcing their style of law throughout the country. It is not a good situation. The only other thing that I would share with you is that the Afghans that are there, that if you take a look at what happened around the airport and so forth, these people all want out, and they want out for a reason. If they've been educated, if they've had an opportunity to see a little bit about what the rest of the world is like, they understand the difference between what Afghanistan could have looked like without the Taliban in control versus what it will look like now with the Taliban in control. So I'm not optimistic that we're going to have a successful outcome there with Taliban in charge.
Yeah. And
by the way, one other thought.
we left significant munitions
Yeah.
and things. So just talking about our world 20 years ago versus now, and what.
Yeah, let me touch on one other item there, and this leads right into that, Tony. It is not a surprise that the Taliban were able to move as quickly as they were. And in fact, in April of this year, there were reports that as soon as we began a withdrawal, that they would move quickly, and that without the support of the U.S., that the Taliban Afghan forces would not be able to sustain against all of the different locations in which the Taliban could do hit and runs and so forth across the entire country. It was not a surprise, and there were reports, classified and unclassified, that this government could fall rather rapidly. It was not a surprise. And so to me and many other members of both the Armed Services Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee, we've asked hard questions in classified sections, in classified discussions, and we have found no one yet that has been able to tell us that this was their recommended course of action, but their job is to respond and to follow the orders of the commander-in-chief and to do the best they can with the situation that is presented to them.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing, and our thoughts and prayers go with not only our service members, but those that are left in the country that are desperately trying to get out. Let's turn now. We'll all be watching this and what that means for our future. I think much to be determined yet as to what that looks like and what it means for our national security.
Tony, look, we're going to bury our dead. We're going to honor those young men and young women that lost their lives in defense of our country. They are the best of the best. We should never forget that we're free because of what they do. And it takes a lot more of these young men and women just like them that are still serving, still responding, still following orders. And most certainly we should never forget just how critical it is that we have that strong defense and we have those young men and women that are ready to serve. So never forget that.
Yeah, well said.
Never forget that.
Well said, and actually good segue to our next question or topic, and really involves both active duty and veterans that have served our country and are the reason we get a chance to take part in conversations like this and pursue our dreams here in this nation. But according to a research project by Brown University, it's the Cost of War Project, just over 7,000 service members have passed away in military operations since 2011. Since that time, during the same period, we've lost over 30,000 to suicide. So you are on both armed services, which we talked about, as well as veteran affairs. So I think that puts you in a unique position to talk about what can be done, what are we doing as a country to help those who have fought for us.
Seems like every single year we have come up with a new idea on how we try to limit the number of suicides and to get people help. We have started out by having a coordinated effort between the VA and the Department of Defense so that there's a coordination once they leave the military and they move into the VA to be able to have assistance. We've done our best to be able to provide additional dollars and funding and direction for coordinated community care for those veterans. We've done our best to do the best practices and to share across the country best practices for suicide prevention. We've started public service programs such as identifying Buddy Week, in which we've asked veterans to go on out, find their buddies, touch base with them, make sure that things are okay with them. We've done a ranger program, which is brand new, but it's one for veterans that are in rural areas to try to get them help because it's a little bit farther away from a veteran center for a lot of those folks. And yet at the same time, the frustration that we have is we can write the laws, but unless it's actually enforced and it's actually adopted by the Veterans Administration, and it's then brought back down through 385,000 employees, back down to where the rubber meets the road at the local level, unless all of that happens, we still have veterans that get lost. And what we want, just as an example, we have the VA out in the Hot Springs. Hot Springs VA wants to be that location in a rural area where they can actually bring veterans in, and yet we can't seem to get referrals to Hot Springs right now. And we can't seem to get the manpower we need authorized to actually move to get there, even though the community desperately wants to provide that service for those individuals. We have the same kind of a challenge right here in Sioux Falls. Right now, we know that people are getting referred or they come in looking for help. And in some cases, they've actually been told, come back next week. Now, we're doing investigations on that. And in fact, there's investigations going on right now concerning that particular issue here in Sioux Falls. So you can never let your guard down. You can never assume that what you're doing is all working. You have to have the due diligence and ask the questions and go back out into the veterans community and say, are these being taken care of and what else can we do? That outreach is critical. And it's one thing that I've had my team doing, and literally they spend a lot of time doing that, both here and in Pierre and in Rapid City, where veterans need to know that there is a place and somebody that will fight for them to get them the services that they need. We can't have a VA that's contacted on a Thursday or a Friday and they simply say, touch base with us next week. That doesn't work. When you've got somebody who's in trouble, you have to be able to get to them and to help them immediately. And if you don't have a spot in a VA facility, get them out into the community and get them help. But most certainly don't let them simply walk away. And for folks out there that have concerns about a friend, don't be afraid to tell somebody within the VA community about it. Don't be afraid to intercede. Don't be afraid to be that person that makes the hard choice to say, so-and-so needs help. We're not going to let them go. We're not going to look the other way. But these veterans need that. And particularly right now with what's going on in Afghanistan, we've had thousands of our young men and women from South Dakota that have served in Afghanistan. And our message to them has been, you did not serve in vain. What you did was to keep this country safe for 20 years. You've set the basis for that time period for 2 decades in which you've allowed our country to be free of those terrorist attacks that otherwise would have emanated from that lawless part of the world. So for them and those that are right now looking at this saying, why did I give this up? Why was I wounded there? Why did my family suffer and so forth? We have to let them know that their service was for a good cause and it was not a failed lesson. It was not a failure. It was a success. And we all recognize that. And that's a critical part of the message that we've got to be sharing to these veterans that are out there right now that are really feeling bad. And a lot of these same veterans, they're looking and they're trying to find their interpreters. They're trying to find the people that supported them over there. They're worried about them right now. They're making calls to our office saying, is there any way you can help get these folks out? We're trying our best to get them out. but these veterans care about them, and this has been a very difficult time for a lot of our local veterans right here.
Well, thank you for shining a light on that. We had a conversation on this stage 2 weeks ago talking about youth and children mental health in our community, and I just think it's so important that we provide the care, and they have to be willing to seek the care, but that we provide the care that is necessary for those that
We have to
that
make
serve
it
us.
as easy as possible for them to receive that care and to recognize that asking for that is not a weakness, that there truly is a mental health just like there is a physical health. And it doesn't make you a less of a person, and you're not going to take the services away from somebody else. You can help by showing other people that if you do need it, there's nothing wrong with saying, I need to talk to somebody. We need to share that. And then we need to help them and not look crossways at them and simply say, look, we'll do whatever we can to help you. Let's get this thing fixed. It's fixable. We've got to give them that belief and that hope.
Thank you for that message. Let's turn to the border and immigration. The headlines have been Afghanistan recently, but if you look closely, there's still significant issues at our border. And just last Tuesday, the Supreme Court denied the Biden administration their request to stay a ruling from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals that found that the administration had improperly ended the migrant protection protocols, so commonly known as Remain in Mexico. Bring us up to speed. What's going on down there, and what needs to happen, or what can be done?
Every country should be able to protect their borders. They should be able to enforce their immigration laws. The courts have made it very clear that it's Congress's role to lay out immigration law. There's two kinds of immigration. There's illegal immigration and there is legal immigration. I support legal immigration. We need legal immigration. But it's really difficult to get Congress to upgrade and to fix broken immigration laws when illegal immigration is taking the forefront. And when illegal immigration right now, just coming across our southern border, July, 212,000 individuals came illegally across the border of the United States. 1 month, 212,000 individuals. The border is not working. It's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. I said this earlier, we need legal immigration. We cannot sustain that type of illegal immigration. And it makes it very difficult to fix the immigration system when you have that type of non-enforcement or no enforcement of your immigration laws. So number one, we have to continue to send the message down south that we do have borders and that they have to be enforced. President Trump, for whatever you thought about it, the fact that he sent a message that said, you're not welcome to come here illegally. If you're going to do it, you need to come here and use legal means. That's the appropriate message that we should be sending. But the second part of that should be that for individuals that are down there that want to come in, that there is some hope that we could actually have a system that gave them a fighting chance to get in here and to be hard workers and to add to our prosperity, what's good for our country. Let me give you the second part of this that I think is critical that we should always recognize. I know I get into the weeds a little bit of this, but I think it's important to recognize. I don't know what you think about our unemployment rate here, but for the most part in South Dakota, we're about 2.9% unemployment. We need good employees. We need families coming with young people that are hungry to improve their lives. We need that. That's where most of us came from, was an idea that this is a place where dreams come true. And that if you work hard and if you've got ideas, you can make a better life for you and your families. And that's a marvelous thing that we shouldn't forget about. I've said this before, I think we should celebrate our diversity. That's important to do. But you've got to do it under a legal system. Today in America, we do not create enough babies to even make up for those that die. In other words, our population right now, you have to have about, they call it total fertility rate, TFR of about 2.1 for every woman in the country during her lifetime. So you have to have about an average of 2.1 babies per woman in their lifetime just to break even on population. We're at about 1.64 right now. China is close to about 1.05. And so China's got real problems over there because not only did they tell everybody you can only have one child for a while, but they also encouraged, or in many cases, they encouraged only boys, which meant that in China, they were aborting baby girls. So now you have an entire generation where a whole lot of boys are there, but you don't have a whole lot of little girls. In this country here today, if we want to just maintain the employment, let alone grow it, we need legal, healthy immigration. Or we're going to have to start having a lot more babies. I'd like to have both, but it's got to be legal, and we've got to follow the law. And right now, it's 212,000 people coming illegally across the southern border is not sustainable, and it has to be addressed. And the best way you do that is enforce the laws and let the folks down south know that if you come in and you simply claim asylum because you're in danger, we're not going to buy that in that fashion anymore. You're going to have to stay there and apply, but we've got to fix the immigration system in the country today. We've got dreamers here that were brought in through no fault of their own. Their moms and their dads brought them in. We're working right now on immigration reform, and in the Senate right now, there's a group of us that have been doing this since January again. There's hope, but it's extremely difficult when you have that many individuals who are illegally coming into the country today.
Yeah, thank you for that. So message is more babies.
Amen.
We'll
Amen.
solve immigration. Let's flip to another topic we've been talking about a long time, and that's infrastructure. When Senator Thune was here in March, we thought we were close. Here we are, the end of August. There seems to be bipartisan support for the $1 trillion physical infrastructure plan. There's a lot more discussion and debate around the 3.5 trillion, we'll call it social or human
Welfare plan.
Human infrastructure plan. What and you're going back in September. What should we expect, or how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, we do need an infrastructure package, one that we can look out 5 to 8 years on. The $1 trillion product, which I happen to have been one of the group of 20 that worked on it, we started on it back in January. I really thought that I was going to be able to support it. In fact, I worked on it all the way up until about a week before the final passage and was really optimistic that we were going to get a good deal done. There are a lot of things in there that I actually was actively participating in to get included in terms of broadband expansion, some stuff for roads and bridges, and clearing up some things in terms of making it easier to get roads and bridges done. Literally for housing and for doing the infrastructure for housing so that you have water systems, sewer systems, and so forth to make it easier, less expensive for organizations to actually get the infrastructure in so you could build houses for less money. Those were all items that I thought were really positive in this. But that was a 2,702-page bill. We started reading it about a week beforehand after all the different pieces all kind of come together. Now, I know most people will tell you, well, you ought to read every single bill. And it doesn't work that way. You try to get your team together and you get your team to look through these things. Well, let me just give you an example. On page 1067, you can go look it up. It has a little bit of an Orwellian flavor to it. This was part of an underlying bill that was the basis that came out of the Environment and Public Works Committee that I used to sit on. I know a lot of the folks on there. I mean, good people. But they put out a bill that has some items in it that I think most people in South Dakota would say is going too far. And we couldn't get it fixed. In fact, what they said in there is every new private passenger vehicle is going to be mandated to have, now get this, a blood alcohol content measuring system, which will be passive in nature. I know I can see some of you going, what? But it goes in and would be reported centrally, and it would determine whether or not, based upon what Washington decided was an appropriate alcohol limit in a separate part of the bill, and then based on that, your vehicle would either work or not work. Mandated. And oh, by the way, it also mandated that since they want to go to electric vehicles, that vehicles would also start to have GPS reportable items so that we could figure out how many miles all of the vehicles are going to be traveling, so that if we want to tax you or follow it, once again, that was going to be mandated for new vehicle activity. These, I thought, went too far. And honestly, when we brought it up to the folks, most people that were even on the committee said, does what? We're just doing a study. No, you have multiple sections in the bill that amount to a mandate that says, if you don't have this within 3 years, it must be done, and every vehicle within 10 years will have this incorporated into the systems. I'm sorry, folks, but to me, that's the kind of thing that most people in South Dakota say, you're going too far. What's that doing in an infrastructure bill? I talked to the folks in the committee. Some of them said, well, I don't like people driving drunk, and I don't see any problem at all with putting something like that in there, and why not? I just think that most people in South Dakota don't feel the same way, and they don't want the federal government checking on your alcohol content and recording it and keeping track of you and your vehicle and mandated within 10 years. So I put in an amendment that would have just simply taken that and made it to report, a voluntary program and so forth. But because of some antics on the floor of the Senate, not a single amendment was allowed. So I voted against the bill. And right now we're hoping that maybe something comes out of a conference committee that's a little more reasonable. And if that's the case, I hope to be able to support that $1 trillion over a 5-year period for good infrastructure, both rural and urban, but good stuff. The other piece on it, which is about a $3.5 trillion program, would authorize free pre-K. It would have included also community college, free. Daycare would have been included. Look, folks, there are some things you can afford and some things you can't afford. This is one that I think is best left at the local level. I disagreed with trying to do this all at the federal level and making promises that would have been literally something that we don't have the money to pay for. We've got about a $32 trillion national debt right now. It's going to go up. We're not bringing in as many dollars in revenue as we're putting out. And so each time we increase that amount of debt that we're going to have and pass on to the next generation, we may not be able to say exactly how we're paying for it, but we've got to get back to something like that. And in this particular case, we felt that a number of the items that they had proposed in there to actually pay for it would have been taking away from what we thought was appropriate tax policy that we passed in 2017 that actually made this economy start to grow again and brought investment back into the United States again. We thought that the proposals that they had out there for increased revenue, some of which included taxation for people on inheritance, for transfers of land and so forth, even if it's from father to son or son to, or father to daughter, on the values at the time, we think the vast majority of your small businesses and so forth, based upon that, probably would have had significant tax burdens to bear that may very well have required the sale of the businesses themselves. We thought it was wrong, and it's not something that we can support at this point. Now, once again, what's coming out between the House and the Senate are just recommendations. The big bill that we're actually going to see coming on this particular program called reconciliation will be a conference committee report between the House and the Senate where they give directions to the different committees about how to spend the money over an extended period of time. That remains to be seen yet. That has not been crafted yet. And Democrats will pass that on a 51 vote margin if they can get 51 votes in the Senate to do so. Right now, they don't have the votes to do that particular bill.
And that was my question. So don't have the votes on the 3.5 trillion. Does the 1 trillion get done? And if so, what's in there for South Dakota? For South Dakota?
I don't know if the 1 trillion gets done. I think it may very well get done. I'm hopeful that in a conference committee setting that they'll take out some of the mandatory items that I found offensive and many other members found offensive as well. So there will be some cleanup there, and they'll continue to negotiate on that. Like I said, I've already got the amendments in place that we can use. I'm hopeful we can get something along that line done. I think we need an infrastructure package. I don't know whether the House will get everything put together to get the $1 trillion package out. I think they will. Remains to be seen whether they can keep all of their members together on it. The 3.5 trillion, honestly, there's not a single Republican that's going to support it. So they'll have to have all of the Democrats on. And there's a number of Democrats that have already expressed the fact that it's way too much because there is no way to be able to pay for it over an extended period of time. And second of all, it's making entitlements now for the future that would be very difficult to undo. And so I think Democrats are going to have to be able to defend some seats that would be pretty challenging. I think Senator Sinema has made it clear that she's not in favor of it right now. I think Senator Tester out in Missouri or in Montana is going to have a difficult time accepting it. I think Senator Manchin may very well have a difficult time in accepting it. And they need all three of those in order to pass that package along with all the rest of their members. So
Yeah, something we'll keep an eye on. In the $1 trillion package, what's in there for South Dakota?
a number of items that I think will fit. Number one, broadband in rural areas and in underserved areas. We'll get a significant boost. We'll also have a significant boost in roads and bridges construction here in South Dakota to the tune of, over a period of 5 years, you're talking millions of dollars, I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars. You're also talking about specifically for a water project, Lewis and Clark. We've included Lewis and Clark in there, finishing that one up. We've also included additional funding for electric utilities to be able to put into new areas where you're trying to build a location where there's housing and so forth, but you've got to put in underground utilities as well. We've also included specific language that will make it less expensive for communities to be able to buy without taxes on it, equipment and materials and supply it to a developer and not have to pay tax on the materials and supplies if it goes into an infrastructure package, which in some cases, according to some of your national organizations, could save 40% on some of the infrastructure development. We've also included for the broadband additional cybersecurity protections, or at least an organized effort so that cybersecurity we can use under Homeland Security, a coordinated effort, and make it easier for them to share the best practices with your local organizations that are responsible for cybersecurity as well. It's a hardening of your cyber defenses has been included within this package as well. So you're talking roads and bridges, you're talking water development, you're talking electrical utilities, you're talking broadband expansions, where everybody basically would have very good, strong broadband, rural and non-rural areas, and Indian reservations as well. So we've tried to hit all of the items which most people consider to be infrastructure development.
Great, thank you. We'll keep an eye on that. And another item that we're all keeping an eye on, it's been a unique year in terms of weather, whether it's fires out west or hurricane, there's droughts, there's floods. Talk to us about energy policy and the climate, the correlation between the two, and then what are you supportive of, or where do you see there to be support from both sides to move us forward?
Climate change is real. And the challenge is how do you address climate change and the carbon that's going into the atmosphere and other chemicals while at the same time not destroying your economy. The vast majority of the carbon that's going in today is not coming from the United States, it's coming from India and from China. But nonetheless, there's a huge number of people in America today that really do want to do everything we can to limit the total amount of carbon that we're releasing into the atmosphere. I personally believe that you're going to see more electric vehicles. You're going to see more bio-based fuels coming through. I think ethanol can play a major role once we get the competition between the petroleum industry and the biofuels industry kind of under control again. Right now they're fighting. I mean, petroleum understands that they're having a reduced footprint right now, and they see biofuels as a competitor of theirs, and they don't like it at all. But bio-based fuels most certainly can play a part. Ethanol plays a huge part in that as an oxygenate, which means a cleaner burning fuel, and you get a higher octane, which is positive for the environment as well. So I think there's a good possibility of a positive impact coming from the upper Midwest with regard to bio-based fuels, diesel and ethanol both. Second piece on this, long term, where do we go? I think you take the best of everything. If you can clean up coal, then use the coal. If you can't clean it up, then limit it. If you can clean up petroleum, clean it up. We definitely should have more nuclear development, most certainly that should play a part in it. But there's something else going on here. While we have wind development, I really think long-term, based on the information that I've learned, I can just tell you, solar is unlimited. And it's not just ground-based solar. In fact, there's been discussions right now. China has publicly announced that they intend to create solar or space-based systems to collect solar energy. It's not pie in the sky. We're in better shape than they are. We know a lot about it. It makes sense. You could actually have solar making up, according to folks that I've talked to, responsible individuals, that solar could be probably the most significant source of energy for our country within 30 years. And the technologies are there today to do that. And so I think there are real opportunities here for our country to advance and to use a limited amount of carbon in the future. But I'm going to go one step farther. I think we also have to be innovative, and we have to find ways to actually bring carbon out of the atmosphere as well. It's there, it is real, and it should be something that we address and we recognize, but we should not destroy our economy in doing so. We need a strong economy, and that means we need to use all of the energy sources that we can possibly get our hands on, but make them as clean as possible and reduce the carbon footprint and the methane footprint as much as possible moving forward. And the sooner we get started on it, the better. But China and India are still the major polluters, and they're going to be the real challenge for us.
Yeah, a lot of work to be done there. So thank you for that. Let's switch gears. Hard to believe, but we're going to be talking election, 2022 election, and that has already begun. Let's talk about the future of the Republican Party. President Trump still has significant influence. Who's in charge? As we head to the election, who should we be listening to from a Republican standpoint?
Look, I can tell you that clearly President Trump has a following, no question about that. Joe Biden has a following right now. On the Republican side, I think it's wide open. I'm not sure that the eventual nominee for the presidency from the Republican side has even been recognized yet. I think it's entirely possible, just as in many years, you get individuals who will step forward and challenge the status quo. Most certainly, President Trump right now has clearly expressed an interest in participating in it. I think a lot's going to happen, and we're going to find out whether or not candidates that he endorses in the 2022 midterm. I think that'll give people a lot of indication about whether his support is as strong as some people think it is, or if it's less than what people think it is. But that'll be an interesting study to follow through on. I can tell you this much. I think there's a lot of people out there right now that want to see government get back to the basics. I think they want to see a government that, number one, recognizes the primary purposes of government: provide for the national defense, provide for interstate trade, provide for education for our kids, because they really are our future, and protect society from those who would do us harm. And those are pretty simple, straightforward items that I think people in the upper Midwest would abide by. The challenge is how do you take that and separate it and focus on that, which the vast majority of Americans, I believe, think is critical, and then cut out all of the other issues that are social in nature, or that become the hot item of the day at that particular point. And where in this whole discussion do we get back to how do we pay for the programs that are being promised to the American people today? And how do we provide for a national defense in which we have threats from adversaries that are real in nature, China and Russia. Russia as a receding threat, but China as a real growing threat, who clearly has the United States in its sights. And how do we focus on that and get the American people to understand that there is a need for that as a primary focus of the federal government in the future? Those are challenges, and I think the individuals who best express that and who are seen as being safe are perhaps the individuals that will lead the country after 2024.
And yeah, you're right. A lot of the issues we're talking about today are going to be issues that are discussed as we head towards the ballot box next year. And that actually leads into my next question around voting rights. You talk about things that are hot topics. This past Saturday, marches were held across the country in cities. Many of those were marching were saying that voting rights were under attack. And the reason they're saying that, since January, 48 states have introduced 389 different bills related to voting. Texas just passed their bill this last week. Arizona, Florida, Georgia, others have passed bills of their own. In what many say is a lack of evidence of election fraud, including yourself, from last election, do you see these measures that are moving forward in the states as helpful or divisive? And then as you head back in September, what do you see Congress's role at a federal level?
Yeah, look, the creation of a voting system is left to each state with limits. You can't take away someone's right to vote or make it impossible. And the federal government has in the past passed certain overarching voting rights laws. But in this particular case, the states are responding to a time in which there was a pandemic. And there were a number of relaxations of some of the more areas in which people could get together and join in together. They made it easier for people to vote from home, but they still wanted to have integrity in the voting system so that people believed that there was no fraud involved. And thus is the reason why you have people that are now putting out laws that say, well, what you did in an arbitrary fashion because of COVID-19 should not be the law of the land permanently. Others are saying, well, I like voting on election day, but I'd like the opportunity to vote before election day. I think we ought to just throw out as an example. I think South Dakota's voting laws are really good. And I think the fact that we can vote in advance and not have to write down an excuse for voting in advance is a positive thing. And in fact, I think it's probably one of the best practices for other states to look at. And, if you can't vote literally, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks in advance of an election right now, like it is in South Dakota, that's a positive thing. But at the same time, we don't do what they do in Washington, D.C., which is to send out official ballots across to everybody, carte blanche, with names on them that go to places where people haven't lived there in 3-4 years. Our staff in D.C., things turn over on a regular basis. My staff was getting vote forms, literally official ballots, for people that hadn't lived in that same apartment complex for years. And yet here they are, all you got to fill them in and send them back in if you wanted to. Not be against the law, but that's not voter integrity. That's not a good way to do it. What's being done right now at the federal level is to suggest that, number one, voter IDs, that in most voter identification and pre-registration, under most of the proposals that are coming through Washington right now on a national basis, would eliminate your voter registration if it's done before Election Day. One of the supposedly reforms takes the Election Commission from an equal 3-3, 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, to a 3-2, with the majority having a one-vote edge over the minority, which is never the way that the Election Commission has been done in the past. Another proposal in that same bill right now that's up there that they call a reform would say that everybody can put $200 in and it'll be matched 6 times over to go into House and Senate races. That's wrong. That's not the way this thing should work. So items that are identified as reforms, in many cases, we don't see as reforms. We see them as being mistakes. I like what we do in South Dakota, and I'm not afraid to have that type of a program, but I want to know who the voters are. And I also don't want them to have voter drop-off ballot boxes that aren't being protected, that aren't being monitored. I think that's wrong. But in some cases, they actually want to make that a rule that everybody's got to have that. So what they may call as voter reform, in some cases, I think are bad policy decisions that are being suggested in the form of reform. those issues have got to be addressed. If we did exactly what we do in South Dakota, I'd have no objection to it, but that's not what's being proposed in either the House versions or in the Senate versions, and I do not see them becoming law.
Okay. Thank you for that, and we're coming up we're right at 1 o'clock here. Did want to ask, we're coming into a season now where numbers in terms of COVID are on the rise, hospitalizations are on the rise. From your perspective, where have we gotten it right over the last 18 months, and where have we fallen short? And is there any talk about further action in terms of stimulus, depending on how this plays out?
There's been no discussion about further stimulus at this point. If you take a look at the states that opened up, their economies seem to be rolling along. For states that decided they would stay closed for an extended period of time, it's been more difficult and challenging for them to maintain a voter support or citizen support. Since the beginning of this year, I probably spent more time with my wife at Mayo and me in a hotel room, and Jean either in the hotel room with me or in a hospital bed, than I have in my own bed back in Fort Pierre up until this last week. And in visiting with the doctors at Mayo and in visiting with physicians that are friends of mine that I believe in, physicians that are in Sioux Falls, physicians that are in Pierre. Look, physicians in D.C. that are our Senate physicians, if you have any question at all as to whether or not you should take the vaccine, please talk to your doctor, listen to them. And unless there's a medical reason for you not to take a vaccine, take the vaccine. They are safe, they are effective, and even if you think you actually had COVID, if you take the vaccine and your doctor knows that you've had COVID, you increase substantially your ability to fend off the Delta variant, which will kill you. The Delta variants that's out there right now and which is coming through, this is as dangerous, if not even more dangerous than any of the other COVID strains that we've seen to date. There's no reason not to get it unless the doctor says don't get it. So I think the one thing that I think we've done right, both Republicans and Democrats, is coming around to say, get that vaccine and to get it out. I think what we did right with regard to warp speed and using federal funds to work with the private sector to advance and to use formulations that we started working on in 2002 through the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. And we used it in order to combat things like Ebola, but to be able to use that same sequencing and so forth, and to simply, on a very rapid basis, get the sequencing in for this particular virus in a very rapid basis. That was one of the best things we ever could have done. We did something in basically 6 to 8 months that we never could have done 15 years ago. But it didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't without a huge amount of technological advances. It happened because we started on it back in 2002. So I think that was the thing that we did the most. We put our money where our mouth was. We said, let's get this advanced system in and get it going. And this is one that even as we move forward, if you've already got 2, don't be afraid to go back in and get that booster shot. Whatever we can do over the next couple of years, particularly here in South Dakota, where South Dakota common sense really should kick in, we need folks to get that vaccine. So I'm just simply asking, if there's any question at all, please, this Delta variant is not like the other variants. It is not only a lot easier to catch, but it will kill you. It will kill you. We lost 5 more people announced today in South Dakota. The vast majority of which I presume probably did not have the vaccine. It's there, it's available. Let's do that, and let's keep this economy open, operating, and moving forward. And let's get those kids vaccinated just as soon as it is available for them.
And we're watching that for hopefully that's coming soon, because that's a big emphasis on the kids' safety as they went back to school here the last week or 2. You mentioned Jean. You mind providing us an update on? You've been on a journey the last few years. If you'd be willing to give an update on your family and 10 grandkids now.
Yeah,
so.
10 grandkids, all within 5 miles of us there in Fort Pierre. I spend 3 nights a week in Washington, 4 nights a week in South Dakota, unless I'm at Mayo with Gene. And Gene, I can just tell you, thank you all very, very much for the prayers, the offers of support. It is greatly appreciated, and it works. We've been through what so many families in South Dakota have been through in this battle against cancer, sarcoma in this particular case. Started nearly 2 years ago. We've been in Mayo. We were referred there by the docs here in Sioux Falls after we got referred from Pierre down to Sioux Falls. The team of doctors at Mayo, we have now treated her hip where there was a significant sarcoma cancer. They did chemo, which was successful. They did radiation to remove the rest of it, and then a surgical procedure. But in doing so, the radiation on the hip basically destroyed the hip. So she's got to get a new hip. So in 2 weeks, the docs at Mayo, unless she gets infection or anything, we're going to get a new hip for her. And that'll take a huge amount of the pain that she's living with today. Since July, it was discovered that she had a brain tumor. We went there on a Friday evening air ambulance. On Monday, the doc said, look, 2 years ago I couldn't do it, but with the technology we've got today, it'll take me 5 treatments. 5 treatments later, she had lost use of her right hand entirely. It's back up now, full strength. She can actually do her needlework again. She's been doing needlework. The hands work great, no loss there. We go back in to see, but as the doctor said, he said it was the size of a golf ball. But because of the technology advances we've had and the ability to get right in precisely with radiation, they could take out just the tumor and not take out anything else. But he says, we're going to keep better eye on it. If I got to do it again, I'd rather do it in 3 rather than 5. And yet that type of optimism and that type of confidence comes only because in this country, we're growing our technologies and our capabilities, and we happen to live in a place that has available to us. So we go back in, we're hopefully to get a new hip because this one's gone. And then after that, she's got some nodules in her lung that we already know the chemo works. They've tested it. It does work. It'll reduce it. And we'll go back in and go after it. And her dauber is up. She's ready to go, but she really wants that new hip. So right now she can't move. And so she's either on the couch or at the table or in a chair, and that's really about it. But once again, get that new hip and things are going to be good. Thank you all for the prayers and the support. We're not the first family to go through this. We're not going to be the last. But I can just tell you, the technologies in this country are phenomenal. The doctors and the capabilities in this country are phenomenal. And the goal, if you're going through it, whether it's breast cancer or any other type of cancer, is don't get your dauber down. Get in, let the docs do it, get the faith built up in it, follow their directions, and the goal, make it 5 years, because in 5 years, we double our capabilities to fight this cancer. And in the next 5 years, based on the research capabilities and the artificial intelligence that we're building within this country today, it's entirely possible we can cure cancer in the next 5 years. But you got to have faith, and you got to have hope, and you got to stick to the technologies that the good Lord has given us the capabilities to use. But thank you all for that support and that faith. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We done?
Yep, we are done.
Thank
Cindy,
you
you
all
want to
very much.
come back up? Thank you, Senator Rounds.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Senator Rounds, President Knorr, thank you so much for an insightful and inspiring conversation. For the rest of us today, we have no meeting next Monday. It's Labor Day. And then a reminder, our next meeting is Tuesday, September 14th with the Sanford International. Thank you all for being here. Rotary is adjourned.